When we talk about success or personal growth in the modern world, we often glorify motivation. We look for the perfect speech, the right book, or the ultimate video that will ignite a spark inside us and push us toward action. Motivation has become a kind of idol, worshipped as if it were the key to changing our lives. Yet, if we pause for a moment and reflect, we realize that motivation is fleeting. It appears like a burst of energy, powerful and intoxicating, but then it fades, leaving us in the same place we started. This is why the Stoics, those philosophers who lived centuries ago in a world far less comfortable than ours, spoke so little about motivation and so much about discipline. For them, the true key to a meaningful life was not a temporary rush of inspiration but the steady, unwavering commitment to do what needs to be done, regardless of how we feel in the moment. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers, reminded himself every morning to rise and do the work of a human being. He did not wait for motivation to wake him up. He did not depend on a feeling of inspiration to do his duty as emperor, father, philosopher, and man. He simply acted because that is what life demands. Motivation is unreliable, he would likely tell us. It bends under pressure. It disappears when life becomes inconvenient. Discipline, however, endures. It is a fortress that stands even in the face of chaos and adversity. Seneca, too, spoke about the importance of mastering oneself. He wrote that the man who is ruled by his impulses, by the ups and downs of his emotions, is a slave, while the man who can command himself is truly free. Think about that for a moment. Freedom is not doing whatever we feel like in the moment. Freedom is the power to act in accordance with reason and principle, even when every part of us resists. This is the discipline that the Stoics pursued, and this is the lesson they left for us. If you want to build a life that cannot be shaken by circumstances, you cannot rely on fleeting waves of motivation. You must instead anchor yourself in discipline. Discipline is waking up to exercise when your bed feels like the warmest place in the universe. Discipline is choosing to study or work when your mind craves distraction. Discipline is acting with integrity even when no one is watching. It is in these quiet, unseen acts of consistency that our character is forged. And here is the beautiful truth: when we commit to discipline, we no longer need to chase motivation. Action itself creates its own momentum. By showing up every day, by doing the work regardless of how we feel, we become the kind of people who do not wait for the perfect conditions to live fully. We simply live. And in that living, we find a deeper sense of peace than any momentary inspiration could ever provide. This is where we begin our journey into what the Stoics truly knew. Discipline is not a punishment. It is not a burden. It is liberation. It frees us from the prison of our moods and empowers us to create the lives we dream of, one deliberate action at a time. When we look deeper into the Stoic way of life, we begin to understand why discipline was at the heart of their philosophy. The ancient world was unpredictable, often brutal, and filled with hardships we can barely imagine today. Yet, the Stoics thrived not because they waited for perfect moments or bursts of motivation, but because they cultivated a mindset that allowed them to stay consistent no matter the circumstances. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire during plagues, wars, and political betrayals, yet every morning, he wrote in his meditations, reminding himself to face the day with courage and virtue. He did not wake up because he was motivated, he woke up because it was his duty. This is the lesson that echoes through time: the world does not owe us the perfect mood to do what is right. It is we who owe the world our best efforts, regardless of how we feel. The Stoics believed that our emotions are not to be suppressed but understood. They knew that motivation is often tied to how we feel, and feelings are notoriously unstable. One moment we are inspired to change our lives, and the next, we are paralyzed by fear or weighed down by laziness. This roller coaster is what makes so many people quit before they truly begin. Discipline, however, does not rely on how we feel. It transcends feelings. It says, even if I am tired, I will continue. Even if I am afraid, I will still do the work. Even if I do not feel like it, I will rise. This is a powerful shift because it turns us from passive victims of our moods into active creators of our lives. Seneca wrote that life is long if you know how to use it. But how many of us waste hours, days, even years waiting for the perfect moment to start? We tell ourselves we will act when we feel ready, when we are motivated, when circumstances are better. The Stoics would challenge this directly. They would tell us that the only moment we truly own is the present. To delay is to deny ourselves the opportunity to live fully. Discipline takes the abstract idea of a better future and brings it into the present through action. It does not ask if we are ready, it demands that we start now. Epictetus, a former slave who rose to become one of the most influential philosophers in history, offered perhaps the most powerful perspective on discipline. He taught that we control only two things, our thoughts and our actions. Everything else is beyond our command. This understanding strips away excuses. If the external world is unpredictable, why should we wait for it to become favorable before we act? If we control only ourselves, then the path to growth lies not in waiting for motivation but in mastering our actions, one choice at a time. This is why the Stoics placed such a high value on daily practices, rituals, and habits. They knew that greatness is not achieved in a single moment of inspiration but through consistent, disciplined effort. If you reflect on your own life, you will see this truth. The moments that truly shaped you are not the easy ones, not the moments when you felt invincible and inspired, but the ones when you pushed through difficulty and did the work despite resistance. That is discipline. And as the Stoics knew, discipline builds resilience. It teaches us that our worth is not determined by fleeting emotions but by the choices we make, day after day. This is why discipline is more than a tool for success. It is a way of living. It means showing up even when we do not feel like it, doing what is right even when no one is watching, and building a life of purpose, one deliberate step at a time. And once we embrace this, something remarkable happens. We discover that we no longer need to wait for motivation. We become unstoppable, not because life becomes easier, but because we become stronger. If we want to truly understand the power of discipline over motivation, we must explore the mindset that allowed the Stoics to achieve so much in a world that often seems stacked against them. The first key insight is this: motivation is external, but discipline is internal. Motivation often comes from outside, a moving speech, an inspiring book, or a sudden burst of excitement. But as quickly as it arrives, it disappears. How many times have you felt inspired to change your life, only to find that within days, the fire burns out? This is because motivation is dependent on factors beyond your control. It is like chasing the wind. You cannot catch it, and you cannot make it stay. Discipline, on the other hand, is entirely within your power. It is the conscious decision to act in alignment with your values, regardless of how you feel in the moment. This is why Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Let us imagine a craftsman in ancient Rome. Every day, he must wake up early to work his trade, whether it be carving stone, forging tools, or baking bread. There are days when he feels strong and capable, and days when his body aches and his spirit is low. If he only worked on the days when he felt motivated, his craft would crumble, his livelihood would disappear, and his family would suffer. But through discipline, the choice to act regardless of his mood, he builds mastery. This is what the Stoics understood about life. We are all craftsmen of our own existence, and discipline is the tool by which we shape our character. Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, often reminded himself that life is short, and the morning is not meant for lying in bed. He wrote to himself, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I am rising to do the work of a human being.'" This is such a simple yet profound statement. He did not rise because he felt like it. He did not wait for motivation. He rose because it was his duty as a human being to contribute, to live with purpose, to use the time he had wisely. This is discipline in its purest form, to act not because it is easy or pleasant, but because it is right. There is also another layer to this teaching. The Stoics practiced what they called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. They would spend time reflecting on the hardships they might face: illness, loss, betrayal, failure. Why? Because in visualizing these difficulties, they trained their minds to remain steady in the face of adversity. They did not depend on good fortune or favorable conditions to act. They prepared themselves for the storms of life. This practice built discipline because it removed the illusion that we must wait for ideal circumstances. It taught them that action is possible even when life is painful, even when nothing feels certain. Discipline also creates freedom, a paradox that the Stoics deeply understood. At first, discipline feels like a cage. We think of it as restriction, as a loss of spontaneity. But in truth, discipline liberates us. It frees us from being slaves to our impulses and fleeting desires. It allows us to choose what is truly good for us, rather than what is merely easy or pleasurable in the moment. Seneca once said, "No man is free who is a slave to his body." When we live only for motivation, we are enslaved to our moods. But when we embrace discipline, we reclaim our freedom. We become the masters of our own lives. Think about the people you admire most. Are they defined by bursts of inspiration or by consistent, disciplined action? The athlete who trains every day, even when no one is watching. The parent who shows up for their children, no matter how exhausted they feel. The leader who makes difficult decisions, not because they are easy, but because they are necessary. These people embody the Stoic way. They remind us that true greatness is not achieved through motivation, but through the quiet, relentless practice of discipline. And so we must ask ourselves, what life are we building? Are we waiting for motivation to push us forward, or are we willing to choose discipline, to wake each day with purpose, to act even when it is hard, to shape our lives deliberately? Because in the end, motivation is fleeting, but discipline endures. And the Stoics knew this enduring strength is what transforms ordinary people into extraordinary ones. When we speak of discipline as the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, we must also understand that it is not about cold, rigid self-denial or the suppression of joy. The Stoics were not ascetics who believed in suffering for its own sake. Instead, they saw discipline as the art of living well. It was about creating a structure in which freedom, peace, and purpose could flourish. Discipline is not a punishment, it is an act of profound self-respect. It is the recognition that you are worthy of the best version of yourself, and that version can only be forged through deliberate, consistent effort. This is why Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. In other words, our inner character is shaped by the choices we make daily, not the moods we feel fleetingly. Consider the concept of voluntary discomfort, a practice deeply embedded in Stoic training. Epictetus advised his students to occasionally deprive themselves of luxuries, to eat simple meals, to endure cold, to sleep on the floor, not because he wanted them to suffer, but because he wanted them to realize that they could endure far more than they imagined. When you practice voluntary discomfort, you train your mind to see comfort as a bonus, not a necessity. You build resilience by proving to yourself that you can face hardship willingly. This is discipline in its most practical form, preparing the mind and body to face challenges without fear. The person who has learned to endure voluntarily cannot be broken easily by involuntary misfortune. Discipline also demands that we redefine our relationship with time. Seneca, in his letters, lamented how easily people squander their days on trivial pursuits while guarding their money as if it were their most precious resource. "It is not that we have a short time to live," he wrote, "but that we waste much of it." This is a truth that stings even in the modern world. How many hours do we lose to distractions, to scrolling endlessly, to seeking constant entertainment? Motivation rarely addresses this. It might inspire a burst of productivity, but it does not transform our habits. Discipline, however, does. It teaches us to see time as sacred, to allocate our hours to the things that truly matter, and to live each day as if it were our last. Imagine what would happen if you approached each morning like Marcus Aurelius, reminding yourself that you rise not for pleasure but for purpose. Imagine treating each moment as an opportunity to embody your highest values. This is what the Stoics did. They used discipline to create alignment between their ideals and their actions. They did not wait for the perfect moment, because they knew the perfect moment rarely comes. They did not wait to feel ready, because readiness is a myth. They simply acted, again and again, until the action itself became part of their nature. This is not to say that discipline is easy. It requires an honest confrontation with yourself. It requires you to look at your habits and ask, are these actions leading me toward the life I truly want? It requires you to recognize when you are chasing comfort at the expense of growth. And perhaps most difficult of all, it requires you to commit to the process even when no one else notices or applauds you. But therein lies its power. Discipline is quiet. It does not demand attention. It does not rely on recognition. It is the steady, unshakable force that shapes you in the dark so that you may shine in the light. The Stoics also teach us that discipline is inseparable from virtue. To them, the purpose of life was to live in harmony with nature, reason, and moral excellence. Discipline was not just about self-control, it was about aligning your actions with what is right and good. When Marcus Aurelius disciplined himself to rise early, to forgive others, to meet the day's challenges with courage, it was not out of vanity or ambition. It was because he believed that this was what a good human being ought to do. Discipline, in this sense, is the bridge between philosophy and action. It transforms lofty ideas into lived reality. And this is why motivation can never replace discipline. Motivation is about how you feel. Discipline is about who you are. Motivation asks, do I want to? Discipline says, this is who I am, and this is what I do. And when you begin to live with that kind of commitment, you no longer have to rely on fleeting emotions to carry you forward. You become unstoppable because your actions are rooted in something deeper than feelings. They are rooted in your very identity. To understand why discipline is far superior to motivation, let us consider how the Stoics approached their daily lives. Marcus Aurelius did not wake up each morning expecting to feel like an emperor ready to rule with wisdom. In fact, he often wrote about his struggles with lethargy and the temptation to stay in bed. Yet, he reminded himself of his purpose. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. This is the essence of discipline, doing what must be done, not because you feel like it, but because it aligns with your duty, your principles, and your identity. This is where discipline becomes transformative. It no longer depends on fleeting moods. It turns action into habit and habit into character. Think for a moment about how motivation typically works. It is like a spark, sudden, bright, exciting. It makes us feel invincible for a short time. But like a spark, it burns out quickly. Discipline, on the other hand, is like a fire that is carefully tended. It may not always roar with intensity, but it provides consistent warmth and light. The Stoics understood that the key to greatness was to maintain this steady fire. You tend to it every day, with small, deliberate actions, so that when challenges come, you are ready. There is no need for a burst of inspiration because you have built a structure strong enough to carry you through the storm. Epictetus often told his students that freedom comes through discipline. At first, this might sound contradictory. How can structure and restraint lead to freedom? Yet, consider this, when you are ruled by your impulses, are you truly free? When you cannot control your cravings, your anger, your fears, or your need for approval, you are a prisoner to them. Discipline, in contrast, liberates you. It gives you mastery over yourself. It allows you to live according to reason, not emotion. This is why Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. Through discipline, you become unshakable because you are no longer at the mercy of external circumstances or internal whims. A powerful exercise the Stoics practiced was what we might call the discipline of the will. This is the art of accepting what you cannot control with calmness and grace. Seneca advised us to rehearse life's misfortunes in our minds, not to dwell on them with fear, but to prepare ourselves for them. This practice builds emotional resilience. It trains you to face setbacks without panic, to endure loss without breaking, and to meet adversity with dignity. This too is discipline, the discipline of preparing your mind for reality, rather than wishing for the world to be softer, easier, or more accommodating to your desires. And let us not forget the discipline of intention. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself that every action must be guided by purpose. He wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This simple yet profound statement reveals that discipline is not only about doing the hard things, it is also about refraining from the wrong things. It is about choosing silence over gossip, patience over rage, and action over procrastination. When you live with this level of intentionality, you build a fortress within yourself that no chaos can penetrate. Another layer of Stoic discipline involves the practice of detachment, not from people or responsibilities, but from unhealthy attachments. The Stoics taught us to engage fully with life while understanding that everything is temporary: our possessions, our relationships, even our own bodies. This detachment does not make life less meaningful, it makes it more precious. By practicing this discipline, we free ourselves from the fear of loss and the constant need for more. We learn to find contentment in the present moment and in the simple act of living virtuously. Discipline also extends to the words we speak and the thoughts we allow into our minds. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to guard his thoughts, knowing that what we think ultimately becomes who we are. This is why journaling was such an essential practice for him. Each day, he reflected on his actions, his intentions, and his failures. This was not a mere habit but a discipline, the discipline of self-examination. When was the last time you sat with yourself in silence and honestly asked, "Am I living the life I want to live? Am I embodying the values I claim to hold dear?" This is how discipline shapes not only your external behavior but also your inner world. And here lies the Stoic secret: discipline is not about self-punishment. It is about self-mastery. It is not about suppressing joy but about cultivating the kind of life where true joy, not fleeting pleasure, can thrive. It is about replacing chaos with order, weakness with strength, and distraction with purpose. And once you taste the freedom that comes with discipline, you realize that motivation was never the goal. It was only a tool, and an unreliable one at that. The real goal is to live with intention, to create a life that reflects your highest values, no matter how you feel on any given day. Now that we understand how the Stoics viewed discipline as a path to freedom, let us bring this wisdom into the rhythm of our modern lives. Discipline, as the Stoics saw it, is not about extraordinary heroics or monumental acts of willpower. It is about daily, deliberate choices. It is about showing up when no one is watching, doing what needs to be done even when it feels uncomfortable or dull. Marcus Aurelius did not write his meditations for an audience, he wrote them for himself, as a way of sharpening his mind and reinforcing his commitment to his principles. This is an example of quiet, invisible discipline, the kind that shapes character. In our world of constant distractions, this lesson has never been more important. Every moment we are tempted by easy pleasures, social media notifications, endless entertainment, instant gratification. But here's the truth: those temptations erode our focus, our purpose, and ultimately our freedom. Seneca warned us about this very trap when he said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The Stoics would tell us to reclaim our time and use it intentionally. They would remind us that each hour spent mindlessly scrolling or chasing momentary thrills is an hour stolen from the life we could be building, a life of purpose, meaning, and resilience. So how do we cultivate this kind of discipline? One Stoic practice is what we might call the discipline of daily anchoring. In the morning, Marcus Aurelius would prepare his mind for the day by reminding himself of his values and his purpose. He often wrote lines like, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, but I will not be harmed by them." He began his day with reflection, not reaction. What if we did the same? Instead of reaching for our phones the moment we wake up, what if we spent a few minutes journaling, meditating, or simply setting an intention for the day? This simple ritual, done consistently, becomes an anchor. It transforms mornings from chaotic rushes into deliberate beginnings. Another essential practice is voluntary discomfort. Epictetus advised his students to occasionally deny themselves luxuries, not as a punishment but as training. By sleeping on the floor or fasting for a short time, they prepared themselves for life's inevitable hardships. This practice strengthens the mind. It teaches us that we can endure more than we think and that comfort is not a necessity for happiness. How does this look in our lives today? It might mean taking cold showers, reducing unnecessary expenses, or exercising discipline in our eating habits. These small acts build resilience and remind us that we are not slaves to our cravings. Discipline also requires us to master our impulses. We live in an age that glorifies following your feelings, but the Stoics warned against being ruled by emotions. They didn't suggest suppressing emotions, but rather observing them, questioning them, and responding with reason instead of instinct. Marcus Aurelius often paused to ask himself, does this action serve my highest purpose? Imagine applying that question before reacting in anger, before indulging in gossip, or before making an impulsive purchase. Suddenly, discipline becomes more than restraint. It becomes an act of aligning every choice with our deeper values. There is also the discipline of finishing what you start. Seneca believed that scattered efforts weaken the soul. He wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." In our world, it is easy to start dozens of projects, hobbies, and habits, but hard to stay committed. The Stoics teach us to narrow our focus. Choose a few things that truly matter and pursue them with unwavering consistency. Whether it is improving your health, mastering a skill, or building a meaningful relationship, discipline demands that we see things through, even when motivation fades. And yet, Stoic discipline is not about rigidity. It is about balance. Epictetus reminded his students that philosophy was not meant to make life joyless. On the contrary, it helps us discover lasting joy by teaching us to value what truly matters. Discipline allows us to enjoy pleasures without being consumed by them. It gives us the ability to celebrate success without arrogance and to endure loss without despair. At its core, the Stoic vision of discipline is about creating a stable foundation for life. It is about becoming the kind of person who does not crumble under pressure, who does not chase every impulse, and who does not depend on fleeting bursts of inspiration. When discipline becomes a way of being, motivation is no longer necessary. You don't wait to feel like doing the right thing, you simply do it, because that is who you are. If discipline is the cornerstone of Stoic strength, then building it requires practical, consistent exercises that transform philosophy from theory into lived reality. The Stoics did not believe that wisdom came merely from reading or discussing lofty ideas. They believed it was forged in action, in the daily practice of living according to their principles. As Epictetus said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. So how do we embody discipline in our lives? The first exercise is what I call the morning contract with yourself. Marcus Aurelius began his days by writing reflections in his journal, preparing his mind for challenges ahead. He reminded himself that he would face obstacles, difficult people, and temptations, but that none of these should disturb his inner peace. You can adopt this practice by setting aside 5 to 10 minutes every morning to write or meditate on your purpose for the day. Ask yourself, what virtues will I practice today? Where am I likely to be tested? How will I respond when temptation comes? This simple ritual builds mental readiness. The second exercise is premeditation of adversity. Known by the Stoics as premeditatio malorum, it is the practice of imagining possible difficulties before they arise. Why? Because when we confront our fears in the mind first, their power over us decreases. Before a big meeting, a challenging conversation, or a risky decision, take a few moments to visualize worst-case scenarios and your rational response to them. Seneca advised, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." This exercise doesn't make you pessimistic, it makes you prepared. The third exercise is voluntary discomfort, a practice Epictetus strongly encouraged. Comfort makes us complacent, and hardship strengthens us. By intentionally introducing small hardships into our lives, we train our minds to endure and remain steady when real difficulties arrive. This could mean taking cold showers, fasting intermittently, walking instead of driving, or sleeping without luxury for a night. These experiences strip away our dependence on ease and help us discover what we are truly capable of enduring. They teach us that we can live with less and thrive. The fourth exercise is the evening audit. Seneca and Marcus Aurelius often reflected at night on how they lived that day. Did they act in line with their values? Did they waste time on things that didn't matter? Did they let emotions rule their actions? Before you sleep, take a few minutes to review your day with honesty but without harsh judgment. Write down one thing you did well, one thing you could improve, and one commitment for tomorrow. This builds a cycle of continuous growth. The fifth exercise is focused simplicity. Seneca famously said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." In our age of multitasking and endless distractions, this lesson is vital. Choose fewer goals, but commit deeply to them. If you are trying to exercise more, focus on that before taking on 10 other self-improvement projects. If you want to deepen your knowledge, read one meaningful book instead of skimming dozens. This simplicity allows you to direct your energy effectively, which is the essence of discipline. The sixth exercise is guarding your attention. Our time is stolen not only by others but by our own lack of focus. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do, say, and think. When we live with the awareness that time is finite, we begin to treat it as sacred. Limit distractions. Create boundaries for your phone and social media use. Schedule time for deep work and protect it fiercely. Your attention is the currency of your life. Spend it wisely. Finally, there is the practice of aligning action with values. This is the heart of Stoic discipline. Each choice you make should serve your deeper principles: justice, wisdom, courage, and self-control. When faced with a decision, ask, does this action lead me toward the person I want to become? Does it honor the values I claim to live by? When your actions align with your values, discipline stops being a burden. It becomes an expression of your true self. Discipline is not built in one day. It grows like a tree, slowly, with deep roots formed by repeated practice. The Stoics did not become unshakable by accident. They trained themselves to remain steady when others faltered, to take the hard path when others chose the easy one, to do what was right rather than what was comfortable. And if they could achieve this in the chaos of ancient Rome, so can we in our own noisy, unpredictable world. Discipline, when practiced deeply, becomes a shield against the chaos of life. In a world that constantly pulls us in 1,000 directions, discipline anchors us to our purpose. Marcus Aurelius lived during a time of political intrigue, war, and personal loss, yet his writings rarely reflect panic or despair. Why? Because his discipline allowed him to focus on what he could control and let go of everything else. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This sentence is not just comforting, it's a roadmap for surviving turmoil. When life throws challenges our way, sudden loss, financial problems, or unexpected failures, the natural response is to seek comfort, to run away from discomfort, or to drown our fears in distractions. But the Stoics teach that discipline offers a better path: to stand firm, to face what is difficult, and to respond with reason, not emotion. Epictetus compared life to a role in a play. Remember that you are an actor in a drama, of such a kind as the author pleases to make it. We do not choose our script, but we can choose how we perform it. Discipline gives us the strength to play our part with dignity. Consider the power of emotional discipline. Modern life is full of triggers: a hurtful comment online, a stressful work deadline, a personal conflict. It is easy to react impulsively, to let anger or fear dictate our actions. But Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if someone does wrong, it is because they think it right. If you can, teach them. If you cannot, remember that you were once like them. This practice of reframing situations builds compassion and reduces emotional reactivity. Emotional discipline is not about suppressing feelings, it is about directing them wisely. Next comes discipline in routine. Seneca criticized people who drift through life without purpose. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. Discipline in daily habits, waking up at a consistent time, setting priorities, exercising regularly, reflecting at night, creates stability. Routine may sound dull to some, but for the Stoics, it is liberating. It gives structure to chaos. When your habits are grounded in discipline, you are less vulnerable to the unpredictability of external events. There is also discipline in speech. Words are powerful tools, but they can also destroy peace. Epictetus taught, "Be silent for the most part, or speak only what is necessary and in few words." In the digital age, where every opinion can be shared instantly, practicing restraint with our words is a radical act of wisdom. Before speaking or posting, pause. Ask, does this contribute to virtue? Does this reflect who I strive to be? If not, silence may be the greater strength. Discipline also teaches us how to endure discomfort without breaking. The Stoics often practiced voluntary hardship not because they loved suffering, but because it prepared them for inevitable pain. If you can train yourself to endure small discomforts, fasting, physical training, or limited luxuries, then when life imposes real suffering, you will not be crushed by it. This mindset is empowering. You become less dependent on comfort and more confident in your ability to endure. Finally, discipline allows us to pursue virtue consistently, even when the world does not reward it. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, yet he maintained integrity. Epictetus was born a slave, yet he spoke of freedom as an internal state. Seneca lived amidst corruption, yet he urged self-control. Their discipline kept them aligned with their principles, no matter how chaotic their environment. In our modern world of constant notifications, political unrest, and personal uncertainties, this kind of discipline is revolutionary. It is not about being rigid or unfeeling, it is about staying rooted in what matters most when everything else tries to pull you away. Let us now bring Stoic discipline into the present moment, into our daily lives where challenges are not philosophical exercises but living realities. Discipline is not a grand event, it is a collection of small, deliberate choices that build our character day by day. Marcus Aurelius did not write his meditations for public praise. He wrote them as personal reminders, to stay disciplined when he felt like giving up, to return to his principles when distractions tempted him. He was the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, yet he struggled with the same weaknesses as we do: laziness, anger, fear, and doubt. His discipline was not perfection, it was persistence. At work, Stoic discipline helps us endure the frustrations of modern careers. Maybe you face a manager who does not appreciate your efforts or colleagues who create unnecessary drama. The Stoics would advise, do not let them dictate your state of mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good, and the ugliness of evil, and I know that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. This isn't resignation, it's preparation. By expecting difficulties, you are less shocked when they arise. You can stay disciplined in your responses instead of being dragged into emotional chaos. In relationships, discipline allows us to love others without losing ourselves. It teaches us to set boundaries, to listen without judgment, and to forgive without condoning harmful behavior. Epictetus advised, when you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger. This does not mean tolerating abuse or neglect. It means using discipline to approach conflicts with clarity, not raw emotion. A disciplined heart can love more deeply because it does not depend on others for its peace. In self-improvement, discipline is the bridge between intention and transformation. Motivation is fleeting, it fades with mood and circumstance, but discipline endures. Seneca compared life to a long voyage. If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. Without discipline, we are tossed around by desires, trends, and fears. But with discipline, we chart our own course. This may mean waking up earlier to reflect or study, saying no to instant pleasures for the sake of long-term growth, or practicing mindfulness even when life feels too busy. Consider voluntary discomfort again. Today, this could look like taking cold showers, fasting intermittently, or limiting time on social media. These small acts strengthen your mind, teaching it not to cling to comfort or fear pain. They create a buffer between you and life's inevitable hardships. If you can face discomfort willingly, you will not be shattered when discomfort comes unwillingly. Another practice is discipline in reflection. Before bed, the Stoics often reviewed their day. Where did I act in line with my values? Where did I fail? How can I do better tomorrow? This is not self-punishment, it is self-awareness. Journaling for just 10 minutes a day can bring profound clarity. And let us not forget discipline in focus. The modern world is designed to scatter our attention. But Marcus Aurelius urged, do every act of your life as though it were the very last. This is a call to presence. To focus deeply on one task at a time. To live fully in this moment instead of being lost in what-ifs and distractions. Stoic discipline is a daily practice, not a destination. It is about showing up for your work, your relationships, your values, even when you don't feel like it. Over time, these small acts of discipline compound into mental strength that no chaos can break. As we arrive at the end of this journey into Stoic discipline, let us pause and reflect on what it truly means to live a life built on this ancient wisdom. Discipline, as the Stoics understood it, is not about suppressing who you are or living a life of cold restraint. It is about aligning your daily actions with your highest values. It is about transforming chaos into order through steady, intentional living. It is about building a fortress within yourself that no storm, no opinion, no failure can tear down. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every day to stay grounded, to expect obstacles, and to meet them with reason instead of anger. Epictetus taught that true freedom comes not from chasing every desire but from mastering yourself. Seneca urged us to remember that time is our most precious resource, and how we spend it defines our entire existence. These were not abstract ideas for them, they were tools for survival in a world just as uncertain and demanding as ours. Think about your own life. Where does your motivation fail you? Where do you wait to feel like it instead of doing what needs to be done? Where do you let temporary emotions steer your ship instead of holding fast to your chosen course? These are the questions discipline helps us answer. This is why Stoics place such immense value on deliberate practice, the daily act of showing up, no matter how you feel, and doing what must be done. Picture yourself as a craftsman working on the most important masterpiece you will ever create, your own soul. Every disciplined act is a stroke of the chisel, shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and freer. You are no longer a prisoner of motivation, which comes and goes like the wind. You are anchored in something deeper, something unshakable. And this does not mean a life without joy. On the contrary, discipline creates the space for real joy, the kind that comes from knowing you lived true to your values, that you faced fear and did not back down, that you used each day as it was meant to be used. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, it is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live. So begin to live. Practice small acts of discipline every single day, wake up with purpose, reflect on your actions, embrace discomfort, and let your actions, not your moods, guide your life. This is how you become unstoppable. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your reflections may help someone else on their path toward mental strength and inner peace. Together, let us keep these ancient teachings alive, not as words on a page, but as a way of living that can change our world from the inside out.